Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, children, as well as babies, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the Driveline Academy podcast, the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast, as voted by the millions and millions of listeners that we have. I am your host, Deven Morgan, Director of Youth Baseball at Driveline, your Marble Mouth host, your steward of this particular audio and visual experience, if you happen to join us over on Spotify. And here we are, we're back on the pod. We got some stuff to talk about. We did a little bit of Q&A. We have some new sponsors. We got a whole bunch of stuff to get into, so let's start with housekeeping. As per usual, let's talk about our good friends at axbat.com. Code DL20 will get you 20% off of stuff at axbat.com, and you should use that code. Axe makes good bats. Jay and the crew over there are good people. They are durable bats. They are high-performing bats, and they are available for you for cheaper than you would pay at retail. So use that code DL20, get yourself 20% off, and just know that, like, as part of that initiative, when you are supporting our friends at Axbat, we are getting a little bit of kickback on the back end, which we use to support our scholarship fund to help kids do this thing, to do the Driveline for either free money or less money or some way, shape, or form. That's what that is going for. It doesn't go into my ever-dwindling motorcycle fund because I sold my last motorcycle. I'm done with that. I got some other stuff for you, though. I think we talked about this briefly, but we've launched the Driveline Academy camps. It's what we're calling a youth development camp. It's a 2-hour session. You're signing up for a week of training, so it's going to be 2 during the week, 1 on the weekend. You're going to do some hitting stuff in a game and goal-driven environment. You're going to do some throwing stuff in a game and goal-driven environment, and you're going to do some long-term athletic development stuff to make sure that you're the best athlete possible, because you need to be a good athlete in order to be good at hitting or throwing. Fun fact, some say that's not true, but I'm here to tell you that, in fact, it is. However, specific to you guys, our wonderful podcast audience, I got a thing for you. Those codes you can use in the Washington area right now. Use code WACAMP30. It'll get you 30% off signing up for a camp. What I'm going to do later today, by the time that you listen to this episode, this will be non-relevant, but I digress. AZ Camp 30 will get you 30% off of camps in Arizona. FL Camp 30 will get you guessed it, 30% off of camps if you attend at our Tampa, Florida facility. So whether you're going to Tampa, Florida, whether you're going to Scottsdale, Arizona, or whether you're coming to beautiful and scenic Kent, Washington, 30% off at the camp. Use the state designation and then Camp 30, and it'll get you 30% off when you sign up. So you should go do that. And this is, I think, something that's great for folks who are local enough to facility that they want to kind of try it out, dip your toe in the water, but don't want to do a full-blown 3-month commitment for something like Driveline Academy Flex. If you just kind of want to get started on this stuff, you want to see what the world of kind of gamified and data-driven, engagement-driven training for young kids looks like in application, and you just want to try it out for a week, that's the thing that you want. So you can find the sign-up link for that. Basically, any of our socials, you can click that Linktree link. It'll have you the link that you go to booking. You can also just go Driveline Academy Camp, and it should pop up in your browser of choice, and use WA Camp 30 or AZ Camp 30 or FL Camp 30. You'll get 30% off sign up for those camps. And I got one more thing for you. I promise you this is a valid and good thing. Long-time listeners, first-time listeners know that we spend an awful lot of time on this show talking about the mental, social, emotional side of the game. And we spend a lot of time talking about that stuff because we are tacitly aware that children are immature and they need help, and they need, I don't want to say necessarily training, but they need structure to help them put these experiences that they have into context. Some of you might reflect back on the episode that we had on this pod in the old podcast studio, talking to Travis Snyder from 3A Athletics, former first rounder, local guy, played in the show, 7-year big leaguer, I believe. I might be a little bit short there. Anyways, Travis and his company with 3A have started to put together some structured resources for players to kind of help them think about putting this stuff into context. So here's kind of what they have in their ad read. 3A Athletics announces exclusive access to the tools every sports family will find helpful to enhance their overall experience in youth sports. 3A Athletics is excited to introduce their premium content membership, your all-access pass to a powerful library of resources designed for parents, athletes, and coaches. By getting that membership, you gain access to in-depth video and audio workshops, downloadable and online parent guidebooks and athlete journals, quick, impactful video shorts to help you navigate the ever-changing world of youth sports. Normally, this is $9.95 a month, but however, Travis and the boys over at 3A have hooked us up with a code that we can give to you, so you guys can get access to it for $4.95 a month. I know that I sound like I'm old man yells at clouds when I complain about the prices of things nowadays, but the ease at which $5 leaves my wallet, having two teenage children, is a little bit staggering. And for $5 a month to be able to, I think, help me as a parent understand how I can do better to kind of put their sport experiences into context and steward them through that, and also being able to weaponize the experience that guys like Travis have in the structure of that plan is just an incredible benefit for $5 a month. $60 a year. Consider the things that we would spend in youth baseball $60 on. Sliding glove? Sure. Batting gloves? Yeah. Helmet? Yeah. Socks, cleats, what have you. I would offer, and I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't, buy things for our children, right? There was a social media post this morning that had this kid, an 8-year-old who's just draped up and dripped out. Shout out to anybody who listens to Zero. Draped up and dripped out in all this baseball swag. And Trey, who's a friend, posted something, and he said, I know you guys are just this is good content here. Trey goes, new rule. You can wear whatever you want, like this kid shown in the video. You can find it on my socials or Trey's if you want. But every time you pout, complain, don't hustle, or strike out looking, you lose one swag accessory. And in the video, it's a young child who's just, again, when I said draped up and dripped out, I'm not joking. And the joke that I made is just look, I'm probably supposed to crap on the preposterous number of accessories this kid's had moving into a big game of baseball, but I'm also old enough to remember the USS flag. Anybody else remember the USSA flag? G.I. Joe, very popular toy for young boys when I was a kid. And they made a toy that called the USS flag, and it was a aircraft carrier toy that was almost 8 feet long. And the point that I was making here is that parental excess is nothing new. I could look down my nose and say oh, how dare they drip out these kids to go play an 8U coach pitch game. But I remember. Point being that the resources that Travis and the gang are putting out for $5 a month is just this is such a complete no-brainer. So if you want to engage with that, and I can just tell you from me personally, this is something that I engage with in my personally, right? My son has a journal. We talk through these things. We had a great session with Travis. He came down to the facility a couple weeks ago. It's just, it's tough because I can quantify bat speed development, right? I can quantify throw ball development. I can quantify athletic development. And because I'm a data-driven guy, that stuff means a lot to me. But that doesn't mean that just because I can't necessarily quantify the positive effect of this type of assistance to the mental and emotional process that athletes inevitably have to kind of go through, that there isn't benefit there, right? I don't know. Maybe somebody can message me and tell me about a way we can use EEG sensors to prove out the validity of this stuff. But I will just tell you personally that I've seen the effect positively that it's had. So use code 3AMD25. So 3 as in the number 3, A as in Alpha, M as in Megatron, D as in Doberman, 2 and a 5. 3AMD25 will get you that $4.95 a month price. Go to 3aathletics.com to go check that out. What else? Okay, I think that's about all we got. Let's get into the meat of things. I threatened it, and we are going to do a little bit of a quick Q&A. I looked at these questions briefly. I didn't formally sit down and write a response, so we're going to kind of go through these live, and I'll try to walk through my process of how we kind of think about these things. So Dave Flynn goes, Little League AAA. So he's got a kid, or he's coaching in the Little League, so rec baseball at the AAA level, so pre-majors, which is a ton of fun. And side note, sitting on my couch last night thinking man, I miss coaching the really young kids. I really miss it. And once my son is done with high school baseball, the odds that you're going to find me coaching just a random group of kids in a random little league somewhere, very high, because man, I do miss this stage. So Dave goes, quite a few players still shot put the ball, cup it, throw darts, just all manner of strange arm actions. Silver bullet, please. I'm trying to think of how exactly I want to attack this. A couple thoughts come to mind. Been watching the Netflix documentary on Netflix on the Boston Red Sox with my wife and my son. It's phenomenal. Not necessarily the biggest Red Sox guy in the world. I mean, certainly if the Red Sox are playing the Yankees, how I'm going to root for. But it's really, really well done. And the episode that we just watched last night is the one that kind of revolves around the trade deadline, right? And you get a real a close look into Craig Breslow, his life, and what it looks like trying to navigate that space, and also navigate his personal life. And I think look, it's wonderfully done. We can talk about all the other stuff about kind of be careful what you wish for when it comes to asking for one of those type of jobs, or asking even to be a professional baseball player, because they also touched on that in the way that things like the trade deadline affect not only the players but their families. And we take this stuff for granted often, and kind of just act like these guys are just robots, and that their personal lives don't have an intersection with their capacity to be competitive in the venue of choice, and that's just silly. But one of the things that they showed in the episode was Brez was, kind of talked about how he would think about, I don't want to say training, because it's not necessarily that, but he's got some young kids and what he would suggest. And I'll find the screenshots, because I'm a big enough of a troll that I do want to screenshot that and then put it on my socials and make some amount of dad coaches mad at me, because how dare children receive the freedom to move fast. But what Brett says is just hey, if we're talking about throwing, then I want him to throw the ball as hard as he can. And if we're talking about hitting, I want him to hit the ball as hard as he can. And if we're talking about sprinting, I want him to sprint as fast as he can. So I know that this probably sounds reductive, Dave, for me to tell you that the one silver bullet here is intent, but I also firmly believe that the silver bullet here is intent. Consider throwing mechanics as something that is representative of environment. If the environment that either you construct or the environment that you are placed in incentivizes non-athletic movements, and to be clear, it also kind of it incentivizes accuracy at the expense of athleticism, then this is exactly what you are going to see. You are going to see kids shot putting the ball, kids that throw 5-finger change-ups, very dart throwy, super. And to think about it, right, it's a very, very linear throwing motion, right? It's not a full body proximal to distal kinetic sequence. It's let me isolate as much of this as I can and just focus on trying to execute this task. That solution is representative of an environment that incentivizes that solution. So the silver bullet being intent is kind of my, it really isn't my attempt at being reductive. It is my attempt at being as sophisticatedly simple as possible, because what I would suggest, and this isn't even a thing that, I suppose this is mostly anecdotal, but it's a thing that I've seen over and over and over and over for years coaching kids, when it was even, if I was coaching in Little League, or if I'm coaching in club ball, or if I'm coaching at Driveline, and I see kids that come in with throwing motions like this, the simple solve is to give that kid the permission to move fast. Because once you incentivize that intent, they are going to find a path to solving for it. And that generally means that they are going to have to find a way to recruit more athleticism, right? It's not that all these things that we prioritize in throwing, efficient elbow spiral, effective lead leg blocking, good amounts of hip to shoulder separation. We don't want these things in abstract. We want them because they are the paths to cultivate the maximal amount of athleticism. So the reason that I'm saying the silver bullet here is simply to give these kids permission to throw the ball hard and far, is because a different incentive structure is going to cultivate a different set of movements. Now, the tricky part is that they still have to play the game. And, Dave says he's coaching at the AAA level. So consider you've got kids a bunch just recently were in either single A or double A ball. So they're either still relatively close to coach pitch. What did they see from the adults in that equation? A lot of dart throwing, because I'm a dad. I'm highly incentivized to try to throw strikes because I'm trying to catch barrels. Or on the kid pitch side, the incentivization there is to not embarrass myself, right? And you're talking about kids that are very much at the beginning of that skill journey, placed in a competitive environment that penalizes them drastically for failing to perform the skill. Are we surprised that these are the mechanics that often result of these environments? I don't know. I don't know why we would be. Put a pin on that. We can talk about the structure of coach pitch, etc. But specific to this question, Dave, I really think that if you're asking for a silver bullet, then I am definitively telling you that intent is the bullet that you need to fire. So standard disclaimers, what does that look like, right? Am I just telling kid to just zoo the ball all over the place? No, we don't necessarily want that too. So we need to have some tolerance for what it looks like to learn. Whether you can do some of the games that we advocate for in the Skills to Scale Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual, things like long toss catch games. Right? A long toss catch game is a way that with no technology on a dirt or grass baseball field, you can incentivize a young boy or a young girl to not only throw the ball hard, but throw the ball accurately. That's the thing. Now, you're probably going to need a fairly significant amount of dosing in that environment to get them moved away from the one that they've been conditioned to, where we have the shot put, 5-finger palm ball, dart throwing mechanic, right? This is not going to be an overnight process. So I suppose, if I'm being very pedantic about it, that intent is not necessarily a silver bullet, but again, it is the singular thing that you can deploy in this environment that's going to give you the most leverage to de-incentivize non-athletic throwing motions and incentivize athletic throwing motions. It just comes down to intent. And if you want a whole bunch more on that stuff, hundreds and hundreds of pages even, I would kind of strongly suggest you dig into the Skills to Scale Complete Youth Baseball Training Manual, because I got a whole bunch more on this subject. All right, Q&A number 2, Thomas Reese. Thomas, boy, this is a good one. What is your opinion on the kinetic arm sleeve? Have you done any testing on it to see if it does help reduce stress on the arm? Thomas, I'll tell you what I know and I'll tell you what I don't know. I have not gone down the rabbit hole and looked at any research that the kinetic arm folks might have. I guess I need to do that to make sure that I'm fully equipped to speak on this subject. The one thing that I will say, and this is very much not about the kinetic arm as a product, but just kind of a way to think about the variables involved with this basic question. If I take a kid and I strap something on them that somehow constrains their movement, and from what I understand, that's kind of how the Kinetic Pro functions, right? There's no There is no silver bullet, right, to prevent arm injuries. That you're kind of strapping this thing on your kid, and you are limiting some of their range of motion. You're constraining their movement in some way, shape, or form. It makes sense to me that if you constrain movement and specifically do so in a way that you mitigate or limit movement speed, that you would see a reduction of stress at the joints. Because the big thing that is going to increase stress at the joint is movement speed, right? The faster that you move the arm, the more force you are going to produce on the joints of that arm. And that's, again, you guys have heard this, longtime listeners, this is all everything we understand from the inverse process of biomechanics, where we are kind of looking at joint positions and calculating stress on the joints based on their position and their velocity. So yeah, let's assume that I'm not talking about the Kinetic Pro, because again, I'm not informed enough to see if they have any research that I will dig into there. Like I said, I'm going through this for the first time live with you guys, so this is kind of more an exercise in having been very deep in this end of the pool for close to a decade and a half, like how I think about understanding these issues. If I'm not evaluating the Kinetic Pro and I'm instead, I'm like wrapping a kid's arm up in duct tape. Pretty effective at reducing stress, right? Because I'm constraining movement drastically. If that player cannot move their arm I have zero layback. You see that? If I am constraining the way that a kid's body moves, and by doing so, I'm also limiting the speed at which that their arm can move. Yeah, it makes sense that I'm reducing stress on the arm. Is that good? That's kind of a different deal. The thing I understand to be true is that if you want to produce force, let me go backwards. If you want to throw the ball hard, you need to throw at some amount of competitive level of velocity relative to your age, then you generally have to move fast. You have to produce force, and you produce force by moving fast relative to your age. So the idea inherently that stress is a thing that we want to avoid, instead of a thing that we want to cultivate an adaptation to, I think is the thing where generally I start to have some questions. We talk about this kind of idea of periodization a lot. The whole point of a periodized process is you are introducing stimulus, you are affording an opportunity to recovery, and then you are trying to get that super compensation result, right? All of that stuff is an adaptation and a response to stress. And it's literally a good thing, right? Like, personal example. I have been able to bench since like last August. I hurt myself apparently doing some lifting at like a hotel gym where I had just come back from our international baseball over there in Italy with my good friend Mark Pudge Gorman and the folks at MVP International, who do a fantastic job for this type of like baseball specific travel. If you are interested in that, go talk to my guy Pudge. Tell him Deven sent you. He's family. He's a great guy. We came back from that, had another family thing to celebrate my brother-in-law who passed away a few years ago. Hadn't lifted in like 10 days. They had one of those like press machines here at the hotel instead of here, typically where I'm benching. I'm a monkey, threw like all the weight on it, repped it out, big gorilla reps, fine, done. Took a rest day. Periodization, came back, hit it again the next day. Got through the set fine. They were like full on, like, real gorilla reps at the end. Nothing popped. Everything felt great. Got back to Driveline a few days later, got under the bar, couldn't do anything over like 255 without some amount of like fairly acute pain in my shoulder. Start to get a little bit worried. Took a couple days off, came back, couldn't get anything over like 225. Now I'm pretty worried, and not to like humble brag it, but for context, 315 for reps was where I was prior to this trip. Got depressed, didn't lift, did my PT stuff, but nothing really seemed to resolve it. Got some treatment, so I'm working my way back into it. And I, at first, was literally like, I'm back to benching like 135. And it's weirdly embarrassing, and it sucks. And but that's also just like the starting point, right? So 2 weeks later, I'm back to repping 205. I will get under the bench probably tonight, and I would expect that I will be back up to repping 225. And the point here is not about like my bench press journey. The point here is to kind of underline the concept that like stress is not necessarily a thing to be avoided. Stress is a thing that can cultivate an actual positive adaptation if you structure it the right way. So when I start to think about a thing that, again, from what I understand, inherently kind of like constrains and limits some amount of movement freedom and movement speed, I don't know if that's like the sustainable path that's really going to get you to the place you want to go. So like, if... And look, maybe this doesn't matter, right? Maybe if your child is a position player and they're never going to pitch, and you aren't really worried about them having like an age-appropriate level of competitive thrown ball velocity, which is important, but and you think that like maybe this is a thing, then I don't know, maybe. But the base idea that I think we kind of need to confront here is the common conception is like stress is bad, right? And this links back in baseball to this idea that like, we would prioritize the kid who has like free and easy mechanics or an effortless delivery, right? And we would put that kid on one side of the table. And then you would put Tim Lincecum on the other side of the table, right? Timmy did not look like he had effortless delivery, right? His delivery was intentional. I think the question here is just like, by avoiding this stress, by not giving yourself an opportunity to be exposed to it and cultivate the adaptation that is going to come therein, are you actually going to get the development that you need in order to stay competitive in this game? That is going to be the primary question that I would have when I start thinking about a device like this, right? I'm fully cognizant of the fact that maybe they have some research, and I said I would read this stuff live, so we're going through this experience together. And once we finish, I got some meetings, and at some point today before my son's high school playoff game, I'm going to sit down and go to their website, try to read through some of their stuff. But the thing I can't not tell you guys is a base conclusion that is often given, that stress is the thing to be avoided, while also simultaneously understanding that stress is the thing that is going to cultivate adaptation positively. I don't know, man. I don't know that we're kind of heading down the right path about trying to avoid stress. Now, look, if you're old, and I would firmly raise my hand to self-select into that group, maybe this is a thing that's going to help, because my dumbass, if I go out and hit the field and I have to go like long toss with my son, in the first 5 minutes, it's going to be like very apparent that his long toss distance and mine are not the same. They're not the same thing. And maybe in that scenario, a device or a gadget or whatever that constrains my arm speed and constrains my arm action and keeps it beyond a capacity that like I haven't touched in a long, long time, maybe that does help me in the current term. I would also offer that like the smarter way to do it would not be for me to avoid exposure to stress, but it would be to like actually onboard myself for throwing, go through that period of time, have that stress work its magic so that my body understands that this throwing thing is a thing that we're doing again. and start to cultivate those positive adaptations in my tissue, tendons, ligaments, etc., to be able to both accept that stress and produce more of it. Stress is not the demon here, right? It's all about the roadmap for getting to the point that you can accumulate and accumulate enough stress that you're forcing the positive adaptation. That requires rest and recovery. Rest and recovery is the thing we probably do the worst of in the structure of youth baseball. Witness the last 5 weeks of stuff that I've been talking about this week in pitch count. So, yeah, like I'm trying to be really intentional here because I don't want to step on somebody's product. But that's just kind of how I would think about it. And like I said, I will do my due diligence and I will go read more myself. And if I come to find out that I am like drastically wrong, then hey, guess what? You guys are going to hear about it first. Got another question from my guy Scott. Scott is the man. We talk frequently. How can we structure tournaments better to ensure pitchers aren't being overused? Oh, Scott. Oh. I'm a current high school head coach and have started to consistently see smaller zones than high school at the higher level of travel baseball at the 13U, 14U level. It's another piece to the puzzle on helping keep arms healthy. 100%. I totally understand what you're saying here about kind of this give and take about the travel ball zone being tighter than a high school zone. I think you can even understand the reason that like a tournament director would incentivize that, right? Because they want kids to have to compete in the zone. It's going to cultivate more action, etc. Scott actually dropped another message for additional context. I had a director who applauded the tight zone, which were tighter than any zone I had seen all season at a more advanced level. Note that I coach at a high school and arguably the best conference in the state in terms of talent. I asked him how many 40-pitch innings will go on this weekend just because of the zone. Man, it's tough, right? Like and he's 100% right here, because if you give a really tight zone for the pitcher, then you're effectively going to see more 40-pitch innings because kids are getting knocked around and getting into barrels instead of being able to get by strikes on the edges. It's hard. And to be frank, man, if I had to design it specific to this thing, I would probably invert this. Because I think at the 13U, 14U level, if we're painting with a broad brush, and I'm thinking about this age cohort at a very large scale, I would rather those kids have more accommodation for stuff on the edges, because at that level is when you start to see the biggest significant drop in player participation, and that is going to have a downhill effect on the total volume of competitive and capable pitchers. So if you know that cohort at that age is, it's like it's diminished from where it used to be, and I know that I don't want those kids to be massively overworked, then it kind of comes down to like a very simple core question about like, what do you want the game to look like? And I suppose I am more willing to give an accommodation for stuff to be called a strike on the edge at 13, 14. From high school and on, like the zone should be the zone. And amusingly enough, Scott, I've seen an acute example of what it looks like in the inverse, where in the high school playoffs, kids are getting like 3 baseballs off the edge. And I hand to God, not joking, got a screenshot on my phone. And it's so tough, man, because like if I complain about it, if my son complains about it, terrible look, right? You don't want to show up. The umpire sets a bad signal, possible that the umpire gets retaliatory to the rest of your team. Like, you just kind of have to wear it, and it sucks. If I talk about it, then I'm compounding that problem and maybe doing so in a way that negatively affects my child. So I got to wear it. Guys, I got to be honest that like I might not have worn it as quietly as I possibly could have, and I might have offered a suggestion that maybe we could just be better. Let's just be better. Because when you're giving a kid 3 baseballs off the edge in a high school game, now it's hard to not see that as being something that is just like ill fit for the level of competition, right? And I'm aware that, high school baseball is not the be all end all either, and then that's okay. But the plate is the plate, right? The plate is the plate. And when you're taking kids who have gone through all this process of they've avoided the big participation drop for right around the ages of 13, playing varsity baseball at high school, the zone should just be the zone. It should just, the zone's the zone. So for me, Scott, to kind of acutely answer the question, I absolutely would invert this. I would allow the zone to maybe be a little bit more generous at 13 and 14. But once we get to high school ball, man, let's just be better. Let's just let the zone be the zone. Now, I am also fully cognizant of the fact that this has a lot to do, not necessarily with do we want the zone to be relevant to the rules, or do we want the zone to be accommodating? That's not necessarily even the question. We don't have enough umpires. And some of the umpires we have are increasingly older because there is not another cohort of guys probably my age, 40 to 50 or 45 to 55, call it that are kind of coming up. And there's even a diminished group of 25 to 35s and a diminished group of 17 to 25s. We don't have enough umpires broadly. So because that resource is so constrained, our ability to kind of QA the thing is kind of mitigated in a fairly significant event because, hey, if my kid plays in a game, or anybody's kid plays in a game, and the umpire's given 3 baseballs off the zone to the point that man, this is going to make it sound like I am just like a whiny B word, but it's not representative of the way that the game is supposed to function. If I complain about that to an umpire association and they go, what do you want me to do? Because I don't have enough guys. What's going to change? Even if somebody who is maybe not as good at calling a game, at knowing where the zone is, who do you think is backfilling that person if they leave? This umpire thing is really, really challenging because it's a resource problem. It's very much a resource problem. Specific to this conversation about a tournament director incentivizing a really tight zone at 13U, 14U. Look, I think you're exactly right that you're going to get the outcome that you're witnessing, which is more 40-pitch innings because kids are getting knocked around because they have to just because there's no edge to compete on. That ain't good. But if there's a level at which I would install that type of thing where we're going to have a strict adherence to the plate is the plate, I think the place that needs to be is in high school, not at 13U travel ball. And I kind of just don't care. I don't care the quality of 13U, 14U at that game. And look, at the pivot point is if you disagree with that, then let the zone be the zone at 13 to 14 and let it be the same at high school. But if we don't have enough umpires who have a fine understanding of what the zone is and they can't call it that way and there's no one ready to kind of backfill them and do better, then we're doing a whole bunch of teeth gnashing over something that we can't inherently solve because we can't create more umpires. Curious and interested to see exactly how we could solve that problem. I got to stay focused on these universal rules, pitch counts, and universal reporting thing. But once we get there, and this is me, trying to speak it into existence, the umpire thing is something we need to solve because this type of stuff is only going to continue. Last one for my guy Andy Johnson. How would you structure T-ball for a 4 to 5 year old age group? Is a smaller team with more of a hit it as far as possible concept better and running the bases? I I think the worst thing that we could do with 4 and 5-year-olds is try to expect them to play a technical 3-up, 3-down game of baseball. Consider we don't have enough time to do all the things. And if we want to cultivate the opposite of like what Dave is seeing, bad throwing mechanics, bad environmental design that lead to the cultivation of bad throwing mechanics, what's the hitting side of that? Like the hitting side of that is just as relevant. Look at a first-year coach pitch game and watch how many of those kids have really pushy, handsy swings. It's the same thing. The opposite of that is giving a kid a roadmap from 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 that scales in a way that's relevant to both the things we need to teach them about how the game works and the skills that they need to be able to establish a foundation for that are going to carry them through this experience. And at the front part of that equation, I think we are absolutely doing it wrong if we front load the technical proficiency of playing a game of baseball either equal to or even ahead of the skills that are necessary to play said game. Baseball is a complicated, complex game. Children are going to struggle when they learn it. Do you want to take a child who is 4 to 5 years old and is even at more of a inability to conceptualize these things and put them into action and try to like really hammer home the technical way that the game functions? Or do we want to lay a foundation for skill? Take a wild guess what you think that I think is the right thing to do. Look, man, I think we are missing an opportunity not only to kind of like lay a skill foundation, but like consider it just from a player's perspective. Consider it from the mind of a 4 to 5-year-old kid. Do you think they enjoy standing on the base and watching a kid at home plate take a bunch of swings and not really know what to do and not understand if they're supposed to run back to first base or run to third base? No, that's not fun. Like, you know, my beautiful, darling, wonderful wife, who is the best partner I could ever possibly ask for and has gone head over heels full with me in this journey over the last 15 years, sends me these videos from like the accounts that she gets on Instagram of like the T-ball chaos. And inevitably, look, it's cute and it's funny, but it is also brutal to watch. Mostly because we are putting these kids in an environment where they are supposed to learn how to technically execute a game of baseball. They're not ready for that, like definitively. So while this stuff is amusing to me, when I start to think about the environmental design and all the stimulus that these kids are missing out and all the engagement opportunities that they're missing out, it kind of hurts my heart. Because yes, a small team, and team, I mean, if these kids if they play a game, that game should be home run derby. Small team of kids who are just like playing a bunch of hitting, throwing, and fielding games that are fun and engaging, and doing that for, call it 45 minutes. Yes, please. Do that. Having a kid pantomime their way through the execution of a technical baseball game that even if we like either alternately handhold them or shove them or physically place them to the places that they are supposed to be relative to the way that the action is unfolding, is that what they want? Like, how many of these kids are really screaming for that? Who's screaming to stand at second base in a T-ball game? Who of these children is really asking to stand in the outfield in a T-ball game or a coach pitch game? It's brutal. It's not fun. It's not engaging. There's a better way to do it. And I would firmly suggest that any team below the age of 6 should have 100% of their activity in the sport of baseball be focused around the cultivation of skill. Not because I think that they all need to go on and play Major League Baseball because the skill stuff is the most fun stuff. Baseball is a fun game to play at the high school level because everybody has a job and everybody has a responsibility and everybody generally understands the interaction of those two things. That's not what T-ball looks like. That is never what T-ball looks like. There's an age-appropriate time to start to introduce some of these ideas, but like front-loading the technical execution of 3-up, 3-down baseball at like a sub-6-year-old level to me is just insanity. It's absolute insanity, and quite frankly, look at the other sports that our kids are competing that we are having to compete with for our children's attention with. Does soccer look like that? Does basketball look like that? Does flag football look like that? No. It's active. It's kinetic. Go just stand over there. See first base and second base? No. Okay, well, see that bag over there? The what? Okay, well, never mind, kid. Just go stand over there. Why? Well, that's second base. Well, why do I have to stand there? It's asinine. So, yes, small groups, skill-focused activities that are highly engaging, do those things. Technical games of baseball, instructing technical baseball at like a pre-6-year-old level, for the love of God, please no. Is that a firm enough position? I know you guys just love it when I just like stay in the middle. All right, look. Got to talk a little bit about this week in pitch count. Got it a little bit later. Got it later yesterday just because my Monday had more meetings than expected. A couple things that picked up on this week in pitch count. One of which was a recurring feature from another kid who had an excessive amount of pitches thrown over the course of a tournament weekend. Somebody followed up with me and was like, hey, here's this kid again going for 104 over the weekend. And like the aggregate number isn't, look, we talked last week about a kid who throws 207 in a day, right? Wasn't that the number? It's all kind of a blur sometimes. So comparatively, hey, this kid threw 104 pitches over the weekend is like, consider the way that this conversation is now framed. 104 pitches for like an 11-year-old over the weekend, and we're like, it could be worse. That's where we are, folks. That's where we are. Yeah, it's not that bad. But it is that bad because that kid pitched in one game on Saturday and 2 games back-to-back on a Sunday. In what other area do we do this with children? In what other area do we ignore the stuff that is clearly proven to be injurious? Multiple high-intent throwing sessions, not only on back-to-back days, but on the same day. We take the most vulnerable population of our players, children who are not physically or emotionally mature, who also are playing for zero stakes. Nobody cares. And we have such a lack of control about the mechanism that we moderate and evaluate their workload that we go, pitching 2 games in the same day? Yeah, sure, why not? Overuse. Like, I don't know. The intention with this whole thing with This Week in Pitch Counts is I was going to run this through July. We've just gotten into week 6. I don't know that I can continue because this stuff is getting depressing. like it's truly just like, it's brutal. It's brutal because it truly exposes the depth of the lack of awareness and oversight in this environment of youth sport, and specifically in baseball. Worth noting, in other sports, the national governing body performs a sanctioning function. They might sanction teams. They might sanction tournaments. They might sanction leagues. But with that sanctioning comes compliance. And for a variety of reasons, we lack that structure in baseball. And at present, getting to a point where the national governing body or some other authority is going to step in and control for this stuff, there's a number of challenges to kind of get that off the ground. You can reflect back to the episode that I posted about my trip to New York and talking with the good folks at Major League Baseball and USA Baseball about where I want to take this thing in terms of the system of universal pitch counts and universal reporting. It's a whole thing. But I need to be honest with you guys, and I need to make sure everybody understands the landscape, which is at present, our NGB structurally doesn't have the teeth to even enforce their current set of limits, which is MLB Pitch Smart, in these non-Little League rec ball environments. And we know what's happened since the rollout of MLB Pitch Smart. We understand that the explosion of club and select baseball has driven a massive uptick in players participating on that side. And they are doing so in a time where there is next to no control for this type of stuff. It's going to come with cost, right? We talked about, this exact kid. It was like $1.50 on the weekend, and now this same kid is pitching on 3 games over the course of 2 days. And some of you guys, we talked about the show being a little bit more active, a little bit more interactive, a little bit more action on socials. And a couple guys, C3 Baseball, right, reposted what I posted for This Week in Pitch Counts. Thank you very much. And had this great comment, right? The leading pitcher in D1 baseball has 30 appearances, 33.2 innings pitched. His team has played 51 games. So he has pitched in about 59% of his team's games, just over an inning an appearance. And we think 10-year-olds can throw in 3/4 or 2/3 of their games every single weekend. My guy Chance Morton, in D1 baseball this year, I can't find a single instance of a pitcher that has appeared in multiple games in the same day. And these are physically mature 18 to 24-year-olds. But we think 10 to 12-year-olds can handle this. I mean, and apparently we do. Kind of the tacit agreement that is being made here is because there is a lack of rule and there's a lack of control, is like, well, it is what it is. I'm telling you, because look, you have to understand that there's a whole lot of messages and box scores that I get on a week by week basis that don't make the show. I've got enough of these to do a 2-minute segment about pitch counts from now through, I don't know, December, just with what I've already got. And context, it's May. Stuff is only going to get worse as we get into June and July. Some of these 10 and 12-year-olds are not only doing this stuff on the tournament side, but they're still playing Little League Baseball. They're playing All-Stars, Pony All-Stars. That's also happening simultaneously. We just need we need better systems. We need better systems. And I've made the commitment that I'm going to keep doing this week in pitch count thing through the end of the season. So I will keep that up. But man, I am telling you, it is starting to beat me down a little bit just because it's just it's the most depressing piece of content that I produce on a recurring basis, is the thing I said yesterday, and that very much is still true. The one thing I will say is I've started to get some examples of folks who are doing things a little bit differently. And I guess that's another thing that we can feature here, not just for my own emotional sanity, but if you're doing something intentional with the way that you manage your teams, the way that you manage your workloads, the way that you manage your own players' participation, I don't know if those are limits that you're talking about to your coach with. Let me know. Like, let's start to tell that part of the story too. I can talk about some of the stuff that I've done with my kid. I mean, I've talked about that a lot on the pod, but I can dust off some old box scores and A couple episodes ago, we actually talked about how how we did that when Danny was still doing like 12-year-old Little League All-Stars. We talk about that stuff too. So if you got some of that feedback, Deven at drivelinebaseball.com, 2 E's. Best thing to do, though, just DM me on socials, either Twitter or on IG, and we can figure it out. And before we end today, we're going to end on a high note. No more melancholy missives about how my brain is broken and I don't know, all this other stuff. Let's talk about some positive stuff. So because I said that we wanted to make this a little bit more interactive, some of you guys have fired up some stuff over to me, and man, it is truly, truly appreciated. It very much is appreciated, and it makes me want to keep doing what I'm doing. So thank you. So I got this. When my son fell in love with pitching a couple years ago, I knew nothing about pitching. I bounced around several pitching websites until I found Driveline Youth. We love it. Driveline Plus, your book, the podcast. It's an incredible guide for us to understand expectations, training, health, goals, gear, etc. They're coming up for a snapshot in July. 2, as I never knew much about coaching, I would volunteer to assist. Why is that? That's really dumb. I would volunteer to assistant coach on my kids' Little League teams, but not head coach. Last year, my youngest, age 8, had a lackluster coach. While I might have passed a few years ago, I don't know the mechanics of hitting or pitching, I stepped up to be a head coach this year. A big part of that is what I've learned from Driveline and age-appropriate insights from your book. I can definitely have the kids focus on external cues, emphasize individual success, and gamify practices to make them fun. So thanks for that. And look, man, thank you. I put all this stuff out because it's my job, and I am fortunate and privileged to have the support of the folks here at Driveline to be able to give me a job to do this stuff and talk to you guys on a week-by-week basis and be on socials and etc. But man, when my anxiety dips down low enough so that I can actually think about how full it makes my heart to think that somebody out there was able to equip themselves with an appropriate amount of knowledge to go do the thing. And it revolves around this type of stuff that I am very, very, very convicted is going to be best for that player, both in the short term and the long term. Makes me feel really good. So thank you. I got another one that this is probably the most gas one. Different message. With that, I want to share a quick story that I hope will warm your heart as a coach/parent who's had a very positive impact on my relationship with my son. Liam is 13 and loves baseball. Boy, I know what that looks like. He's played year-round since he was 5 and still just can't get enough. He's had some nice successes pitching and has had big aspirations to stay out of PO purgatory. PO purgatory. I'm stealing that, by the way. I started using your work with him just a few months ago with some success. I told him recently that I don't know if I can coach him to where he wants to go with a bat and offered to pay for him to start working with a coach. Quote, "Nah, Dad, we've got this. I like your plan," referring to your work, meaning me. Save money and hang out with my son every day. Yes, please. He's always been just okay with the bat and generally pushed baseballs the other way without the power everyone expects based on his size. This last week, taking BP with his team, he smoked the 2 farthest hit balls on batting practice to the pull side. It was nice to see him hit a couple hard, but what I will never forget is the ridiculous grin he gave me as he walked off the field. It's fun to watch him love to do something, see success with hard work, and get to be a big part of it. I get it. I absolutely get it. I get it, and I appreciate as a father what that endorsement must feel like. And at 13, man, we talked about this last episode, right? Like as the parent of a now 16-year-old, my trunk is now empty. And man, the time that I was able to spend with my kids, between the ages of 13 and 16, doing the work together, God, it's the best. So much fun. It was so much fun. and not for nothing, set us up to be in the position that we're in. Set my son up to be in the position that he's in, right? He's not the best hitter in the world. He's working through some stuff. High school baseball is challenging, but like we got to that place where he can compete. Doesn't mean he's a finished product. You know, he's not like a 16-year-old that if we were in the Dominican Republic that, you know, the White Sox are trying to give him like the Yohan Moncada money. Oh wait, no, the Red Sox signed Yohan Moncada. I digress. But we got enough. We got enough done. Simply, me and him working on stuff that we could work on, and I don't know. I don't think there's any more greater aspiration that I could possibly have for what I wanted to be able to do with things like this podcast, with the Skills at Scale book, with blogs that I've written on Driveline, is to help more parents, more moms and dads understand that. That there's a lot of positive leverage that you can have with your own child to help them understand how to perform the best that they can do in this game. It doesn't mean that there isn't a role for having someone that has a higher level of insight, right? My kid is 16 now. I'm going to listen to Eric Kozak about his hitting development a lot more than I will to me. However, I also know his swing better than damn near any swing on the planet, and I might have a nugget or two that I can occasionally drop. And look, we had a conversation about this literally last night. It seemed to me like about just some like weird, I don't even want to go into the details of it. There's just some like weird minor minutia where I saw something when I was watching my son. I was like, hey, I think maybe you can improve on this thing. But then I also couched it with, you're a better baseball player than I ever was, and you're playing the game. I might be wrong. This is a thing that I think I'm seeing. What do you think? We can have that level of conversation and have nobody's feeling get hurt and really have like an honest discourse around it. And I would be lying to you if I said that didn't have a lot to do with the time that we spent together. I like your plan. Nah, Dad, we've got this. Those type of moments when he was 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It's just the best time in the world. And I think the fact that you can soak up that time and you can also have that time be developmentally positive for your kid if you just do it the right way, there's no greater honor for me than be able to put out tools and information to help you guys go out and do that thing. So as per usual, thank you, and thank you again. That's all I got for you today. Good Q&A questions. Hopefully that stuff was beneficial. Like I said, I'm going to dig into the Kinetic Pro thing. I haven't read their papers. I'm sure they probably have something. So I will circle back. We will revisit this topic. High school baseball season is kind of winding to a close. It means we're going to get into the craziness of the summer ball side of things. It's going to be wild and wacky. I don't know. Maybe it would be beneficial for me to talk you guys through kind of the schedule, how we're looking at it. I was talking to a reporter from the New York Times the other day. That's not like a flex. It was a thing that happened. And I told her, I was like, my son is 16. He throws 90, hits balls 97, and he's never gone to a showcase. And part of that has to do with not feeling like that was a necessary thing to do when he was younger. But at this point, going into his junior year next year, we do have to kind of figure out how to potentially dip our toe in that side of the water. And weirdly, I am both here, the director of youth baseball at Driveline, but when I take off that hat and I'm just dad, I am trying to figure this stuff out the same way that you guys are. So I don't know. If you happen to be listening to this and you're a college coach and you want to talk to me about how you are evaluating talent and what that looks like nowadays, I don't know, maybe we'll set up a little conversation. We can have a little back and forth on that. Anyways, thank you guys for joining as per usual on the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast. I am your host, Deven Morgan. I'm down by law, and I will catch you next time. Thanks. Bye.